It's one of the worst water crises that Bengaluru is facing. Many senior residents have called it unprecedented for where they are living. There are long queues in several parts of Bengaluru, not just the outskirts. The crisis has gripped even the hinterland.
Yeah, they had a drinking water shortage yesterday. So he was a friend of mine, so I gave him 2 bottles of water. I'm just coming back with the empty bottles because water has come today.
पानी चाहिए तो 2 दिन या 3 दिन पहले बुक करना पड़ता है। एक गाड़ी को 1600 से लेके 2000 तक मांग रहा है।
3-4 महीना हो गया, पानी इधर नहीं मिलता है बेंगलोर में, क्या करें हम लोग।
270 taluks have been dried. More than 3,000 borewells have been dried in Bangalore. We are just looking at
50% of Bengaluru's borewells have dried up. And remember, the peak of summer is still far away. Deputy Chief Minister D.K. Shivkumar said his own borewell has dried. And a tanker was called in to supply water at Chief Minister Siddaramaya's official residence. The Congress government is saying they will be digging more borewells. Governments after governments have done that. And honestly, long term, this is more a part of the problem than a solution. But again, hugely relied on, and to understand why, it's important to understand Bengaluru, a capital city and IT hub that is landlocked. Bengaluru has 2 major sources of water. 1,450 million litres per day of surface water from the Cauvery, and another, almost half, 700 million litres per day from borewells dug by the BBMP. The acute water shortage in the Cauvery basin that has seen a 32% deficit rainfall, and I'm talking about the data say till September 2023, a big trigger to what Bengaluru is going through, which means by September last year, Cauvery basin hadn't received at least 1/3 of its rainfall that it was supposed to. Karnataka as a whole saw a monsoon deficit of around 47%. The situation is so bad, residents in parts of Bengaluru are paying up to twice or thrice the cost for 1,000 litres of water. Now it's anywhere between 2,000 to 3,000 rupees per 1,000 litres. Those who have money are still finding it hard to get access to water. Imagine those who don't have this kind of money. Residential complexes are looking at some desperate measures, from attempts to policing water usage, proposing fines for exceeding self-regulated water usage limits, to security guards for water patrolling.
I'm coming from a resident's house just now.
Okay.
Yeah, they had a drinking water shortage yesterday.
God.
So he was a friend of mine, so I gave him 2 bottles of water. I'm just coming back with the empty bottles because water has come today. So this is right in front of you. I'm not kidding. This is actually happening.
A number of residents have taken up a very important initiative of saving the RO water. I don't know, many of the people may not be aware that the water that's wasted is of the order of 4 times the amount of drinking water that one gets. And so we are collecting that water in buckets, and that can be used for mopping, cleaning and so on and so forth.
यदि पानी चाहिए तो 2 दिन या 3 दिन पहले बुक करना पड़ता है। एक गाड़ी को 1600 से लेके 2000 तक मांग रहा है। उतना देने के बावजूद भी समय पर नहीं आ रहा है। यहाँ पे पानी के लिए बहुत समस्या हो रही है।
The government has taken measures, from asking tankers to register, warning them if they don't, they will be taken over, to 556 crore rupees crisis funding to meet the water demand, to even 10 crore rupees for each constituency, to assuring of more borewells being dug, which, as I said, is more of a long-term problem than a solution. But these measures right now are immediate, none for the long term. But here's a word of caution. This isn't a Bengaluru problem alone. 223 out of 226 taluks of Karnataka are facing drought-like situation. And again, it isn't Karnataka's problem alone. Because from extreme drought to unprecedented flooding, India is seeing more and more of this. Let's just first listen in to what the Deputy Chief Minister of Karnataka has said.
I am telling you, I am very, very, very seriously looking at it. I had a meeting with all the officials. We are taking over all the tanks. We are identifying the points where our water is available. 270 taluks have been dried. More than 3,000 borewells have been dried in Bangalore. We are just looking at whatever the water is coming from Cauvery, it is coming. The fifth stage will be completed only by December. By May end. May end it will be completed. We are at it. We will see that we provide water to very reasonable rate to all the people. We know that we are concerned about it because all the borewells have been dried, including my house borewell also has been dried.
I'm being joined right now by Dr. Rupa Patwardhan, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, Christ University, Bangalore, somebody who's also very deeply researched on this issue, has been writing about this very consciously. I'm being joined by S. Vishwanath, water conservation expert, Joseph Hoover, environmentalist and activist, and Sandeep Anirudha, founder for the Citizens Agenda for Bengaluru. Thank you very much, all four of you, for joining us. First to you, Sandeep Anirudha, how do you look at what's happening around you? What are citizens telling around you? What are you seeing around?
Oh, there's acute water shortage. It's not just now, it's begun months ago. The tap in my house has gone dry today because not only is Cauvery water not coming regularly, our borewell is dry. Our community drilled a new borewell a few months back and it went dry within a couple of weeks because our entire area is overexploited. There are construction sites that drill 3 to 4 borewells illegally because nobody is issued borewell licenses. Across my neighborhood, every day there are, I think, about 10 or 15 illegal borewells being drilled every single day, and the authorities have not enforced against them. There's total lawlessness. Absolutely, the attitude of both the government and citizens to water is one of total carelessness. This is deep-rooted. In fact, I would say that the culture of our city is one of unplanned development. The seeds of this problem were laid decades ago because we've absolutely not had a planned growth. We haven't planned for the resources that the city has. We've always been externalizing. We've been trying to bring water from outside. The amount of water we draw from Cauvery, we get almost the same amount of water from rains, but we have completely destroyed our wetlands. We've destroyed the ability for the soil for the water to percolate into the soil. We've destroyed our green cover. We've destroyed our blue cover, which is the wetlands and lake ecosystem. We had about 2,000 lakes in the district. We have about 400 left. The wetlands, which cover nearly 20 to 30% of the surface of the city, is completely filled in and encroached upon. So this calamity that's happening was years in the coming. It's just as it's exacerbated to a point where we now feel it. But this has been happening over the last decade repeatedly. There is complete policy paralysis from the government, even though it has.
Before I just go for the introductory remarks to other panelists,
yes,
can you just help me understand this? And because we are very far away from Bengaluru, you all are in the heart of Bengaluru. Do you know of any one person around you who is not facing this crisis?
Absolutely. Everybody is facing this problem. In our ward committees, fortunately, ours is one of the few ward committees in Bengaluru that meets regularly. About 80 to 90% of our agenda is only about dried up public borewells and lack of PWSSB water supply. And this has been the case for the last 3 to 4 months. So we saw it coming much earlier. In fact, we started an active campaign to get enforcement against illegal borewell drilling, but the government is non-responsive. It allows it to happen blatantly. So there's a complete paralysis. There's complete lawlessness happening in the city and there's zero planning. In fact, a very worrying thing is that the state actually adopted Karnataka state water policy, which talks of integrated water management and local water resilience. In fact, Mr. Vishwanath, who's in the panel
I'll
here,
get back to
was
that.
part of creating
I'll
that
get back to
water
that,
policy.
Mr. Sandeep. I'll get back to
Yeah.
that. S. Vishwanath, let me just come over to you. This seems the Aam Aadmi, the common citizen, is sandwiched currently between the tanker mafia and the borewell mafia. How has Bengaluru reached this far? Where are the tankers getting the water from if the ordinary citizens aren't getting them?
Well, let's just step back. There's 1,450 million liters coming in from the Cauvery, and that's broadly assured for the next 100 days, given the reservoir levels in the Cauvery Basin in the 4 dams, right? So of the 1.05 million people who are connected to the Cauvery, the problem is not as severe as those who are completely dependent on groundwater and borewells, right? So there's 25% of the city suffering because they don't have a Cauvery connection. The rest of the city is not doing as bad as is made out to be. But the thing is that we don't have a groundwater policy at all. We don't have a groundwater plan. We don't have the institutions to manage groundwater. We don't know how to regulate recharge groundwater, and we don't know how to control demand and prevent illegal extraction of water. If we get Groundwater Act right, then the crisis should not be as severe as it is now.
I beg to differ on that.
Okay.
In our area,
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Sandeep, go ahead.
No, the problem is,
Go ahead,
see,
go
we
ahead,
are
Sandeep.
actively involved in board level engagement. And in our area, Cauvery water supply right now, despite what the statistics say, is being supplied once in a month, once in 2 months, once in 6 months. People who have legitimate connections to Cauvery water are not getting water. It comes intermittently, occasionally. So there's a huge gap between the data that the specialists are talking about and actual water being received. It could be a lot of reasons. Could be maybe the water is getting stolen. If that is the amount of water that's coming to Bengaluru,
Fair enough.
and if it is not
Okay.
reaching homes, then maybe tanker mafia is stealing it, or there is leakage. There's quite a lot of things that's possible. But bottom line, people are not getting water. They're dependent hugely on tanker water only. And tankers right now are not able to cope with the demand. If you book a tanker, it's coming after 3 days, 5 days, after a week. Even tankers have run out. Most of their borewells have dried out. And they're getting water from distant districts. I'm very sure that within a couple of weeks, these other districts will ban tankers from taking water from there because they will suffer. And this is going to be a real water war.
Okay. All right. Sandeep, let me just go over to others as well. You've made a very important point here. I'll also go back to Vishwanath. But Dr. Rupa Patwardhan, help us try and understand, because from what we are trying to understand, and as outsiders who are trying to understand what's happening in Bengaluru, not only for the sake of Bengaluru, but for the larger context of what's happening across India, there seems to be a problem at several levels. But first, is there a number of borewells that are being dug consecutively? Every time there's a problem, you dig borewells. There's a water scarcity, you dig borewells. But there's nothing else that's done to recharge the borewells, to ensure that the water level is maintained, the groundwater level, the ground table water is maintained at a certain level. There's nothing. So basically, there is no end to digging borewells, but you're not going to get the limitless water. And that's been a problem that several states have faced. It's unfortunate that Bengaluru is on a repeat mode.
Yes, the problem persists in terms of like demand and supply. Here we are trying to understand the supply side of it, where we are trying to say that underground water will be a substitute for Cauvery. So when we are trying to understand it in that sense, I am looking it in the perspective of like Mekedatu. What is happening to Mekedatu? So Mekedatu, the current government is in power. It is their kind of a dream project where they did Padayatra and all of that. So why there is such a delay when we are thinking in terms of like supply side management for a long-term solution for Bangalore water problems? And then I'm also reflecting on like the issue of like brand Bengaluru. When the current government is thinking about brand Bengaluru, and what is the green Bengaluru aspect of it when it comes to brand Bengaluru? There is absolutely policy paralysis when it comes to the green part of Bengaluru's brand Bengaluru's agenda, because the only thing which is running over my head is like when we are thinking about green aspect of brand Bengaluru, the government has initiated watering plans from school children, but where will the school children get water? They didn't think about this kind of angle at all when it comes to a long-term solution. So I think these are 2 points which are running in my head. And also the next point which is running in my head is about the pollution, where the level of pollution in terms of like Cauvery River basin is one of the highest in the nation. So how do we deal with that? And then what had happened to other supply side of like you had Vrishabhavati reservoir. So what happened to that? 2015 they spoke about Vrishabhavati rejuvenation plan, but after that 2015 no one is speaking about that, because it is like a basin which covers the entire Bangaluru. It was serving the water needs much earlier if we look into the historical perspective of like Bangalore water requirements. Okay. So these are some of the problems which are lurking in my head at a macro level. But if you ask me micro level, every day I'm discussing with my students about like water diamond paradox kind of a thing, which we discuss in economics, where water was regarded as abundant in supply and diamond was scarce. But now with the lab grown diamonds, you have water is becoming scarce. You can't produce water in labs. So we are in that kind of a situation. I'm in that kind of a dilemma.
Okay. All right, Joseph Hoover, from City of Lakes to the city of Borewells, how has Bangalore reached where it is? And I'm going to ask you this question in political context, because Bengaluru has largely alternated for governments at the state level, at the assembly level. Whether it be, it's not been one stable government, it's been alternate. So across political lines, is this a collective political failure for a long-term vision to be able to sustain the very nature of Bengaluru?
I agree with you. It's a cumulative failure of all the governments. A lack of planning, no execution. They just talk big, they do nothing. A lot of noise, or no action. And now it's a very unfortunate situation that I have to recall what we were saying many, many years ago, even about 20 years ago. We are saying only when the taps go dry in Bangalore, especially in Vidhana Sauda, then we'll understand the importance of forests. We have destroyed our forests. You talk about the Western Ghats, where all the water flows from. We have destroyed it. So when the Western Ghats is destroyed, how do you expect water to come? We are talking about the water coming from KRS, the dam. Even that is drying up. I was in the forest recently. There's no water in Nagrole. There's no water in Bandipur. They dug 780 feet to get water through the bore. There was no water in Bandipur either. So where are you going to get the water from? You're destroyed everything around you knowingly. See, the sad part is we as citizens have failed. We have not questioned. We're just shadow boxing. We are not punching them the way they should be punched. It's time we woke up and did something about it.
Bengaluru has a very vibrant, alert, active civil society. So it's very surprising if you tell me that citizens haven't acted.
No, they're sleeping. They just shadow box. That's it. They don't come when the situation is critical. I can go back when you're cutting 800 trees here for some damn steel bridge. We have 8,000 people coming. When we are talking about 27 lakh trees being cut in the Western Ghats, we get 100 people coming. Is this the response of the citizens in Bangalore? They are not bothered. They're just enjoying because water is flowing in the trap. Now that it's drying up, everybody is waking up and saying, water is not there. We need water. Where are you going to get the water? You have destroyed our ecosystem. You look at the Western Ghats today. There's no water in Malnad. You're digging 1,200 feet, 1,400 feet borewells. They're not getting water there. So where do you expect water to be in Bangalore? We have destroyed Bangalore.
Okay.
Inch by inch, we have destroyed it. When we have floods, that's it. It's taken over by water. And then when it goes dry, we are bone dry. And all we are responsible is, I mean, we are responsible for
right.
that. And more importantly, I blame the bureaucrats for this mess. They are supposed to be the educated lot who done the IAS, who are supposed to be advising the government on behalf of the people. What have they done? They know things have been going bad, and they know they're
I
still
hear
destroying
the
a forest.
agony in your voice, Joseph Hoover. I hear
Yes.
the agony of how you're speaking. It must be extremely distressing. Let me just go over to S. Vishwanath as well. Sir, you know, let's look at the measures that are being taken right now by the government. You, in the introductory statement, said that it's not a crisis as is being made out in the hinterland. But there are parts where you do not have the Cauvery connection, and that seems to be worst hit. I've heard that as well, but you have Sandeep here on the show who's opposing that. However, not getting into that, Mr. S. Vishwanath, my concern and my question, and many of us across India who are trying to understand this, if you have a deficit that is, you know, worse in many years in the Cauvery belt with respect to the rainfall, and if you have borewells which are drying away, these two being largely the basis on which Bengaluru gets its water, drought in most taluks of Karnataka. So then where is the water going to come from? Because there doesn't seem to be a long-term policy anyway that's functional on the ground.
Look, it's a complex issue, as you rightly pointed out, and I share the agony of Joseph Hoover. The destruction of the environment, especially in the Western Ghats and all across India and globally, is causing the climate change that we are facing now, the 1.5 degree rise in temperature. The heat waves that are coming in, it's now 35 degrees in Bengaluru, so it's sucking away even the soil moisture that is there. But if we panic and we define the problem wrong, then we will have answers such as Mekedatu, which will destroy 3,000 hectares of the Cauvery Wildlife Sanctuary, right? So the solution will be worse than what we are now talking about the problem itself. So it's therefore good to have a sense of proportion. We must restore the Western Ghats, we must restore the Cauvery basin as a whole and restore the soil, the forests, everything there. Right now, if you look at Bangalore itself, let's look at the water budget. 2,250 million liters per day will come in once the Cauvery fifth phase is in place, right? There is 3,000 million liters falling as rainwater on the city. If we tap just 500 MLD out of it, we have enough and more to recharge the groundwater, which will be about 600 MLD. But most importantly, we will have treated wastewater. If we are able to collect all the sewage and treat it to tertiary standards, for which we have the technology right now, A, we will avoid pollution of our lakes and water bodies. B, we will have the waters to fill our 186 lakes, which are now bone dry because they're being desilted. If we fill these 186 lakes, our aquifers will come up and our borewells will have water. Instead of a vicious cycle of drilling borewells, we need to take a plan, a virtuous plan of filling the aquifers. Filling the aquifers will revive the groundwater table and the crisis in the periphery will be ameliorated to a great extent. That will be done by treated used water or treated wastewater. Already we have plants which are capable of treating wastewater to potable standards.
This is a very important, sustainable point that you've brought in, Mr. Vishwanath. But allow me to just dig a little deeper. If the technology is there, if the knowledge is there, why isn't it in place?
Because I mean, our institutions don't have a
whether
single
with the older government, the new government
place.
may say we've just come in.
It's a question of institution building. Both governments, all governments do not build the right institutions. The BWSSB does not have a single hydrogeologist. For them, groundwater does not exist. Treated wastewater does not have specializations to ensure that it is treated to qualities which can fill the lakes. If we build those specializations in institutions, we'll find the solutions.
What you're telling me is appalling. Mr. Vishwanath, what you're telling me is appalling. The body, the civic body that's responsible to deliver water to homes and to monitor the levels does not have a scientist that you're talking about? That this is appalling. How can a government function? I mean, if the Congress government is listening to this, this is absolutely appalling.
No, but it's not a question of the Congress government in Bangalore. No city in India has hydrogeologists manning their water supply institutions except Chennai and recently Pune. No other city in India does that. Groundwater is India's lifeline. We are undercooking groundwater. We don't understand its importance. We don't deal with it scientifically enough.
Okay. Now,
when
see,
you talk
these
about
are such,
filling the
because if you
aquifers,
look at the problem that we are talking about, Mr. Vishwanath, and it's very important for our audience to as well understand, because obviously the crisis is staring at our face in Bengaluru, but this is not just Bengaluru's crisis. This is far beyond, from Chennai to Thiruvananthapuram, to several cities that are largely dependent and are not taking care of their borewells and their wells are staring at this issue time and again, time and again. If I can just get in right now Dr. Rupa Patwardhan before I go over to Sandeep. Dr. Rupa, with a policy
Yes.
that seems to be failing completely, there obviously has to be a two-pronged solutions that will be looked at, immediate as well as long-term. What would you say is a course correction that a government in power needs to do, the civic body needs to do? Because you may for now be able to sustain few weeks or months, but this is not a problem that's going away for sure.
Okay. See, immediately at the outset, what I can say is the government can think of like giving us 24/7 water supply guarantee by managing the demand side of it. Okay. So that is the immediate solution, because they have taken over all of the tankers, they have taken over all control over the pricing, everything. So they will have to ensure that they supply water. That is the immediate solution which I can think of. I know it has a lot of like loopholes in terms of like getting it done. Okay, instead of giving us some other guarantees, let us prioritize water and let them give Karnataka people a water guarantee. That will be my what does that take? And if we are thinking about long-term solutions, I've written about it, where I spoke about the water conservation strategies, which is already there in research. People have suggested, as my co-panelist Vishwanath sir rightly pointed out, that there is no specialist when we take policy decisions. Forget about specialist, we don't have a mayor. Okay, so in that kind of a context, like how are we dealing with the local problem? Because our IT hub is trying to resolve all sort of like investment plans all over the world, but what is it doing to the local economy? So what is their corporate social responsibility towards managing water crisis in Bangalore? So these are some of the things which we can think of in the long-term solution, where water conservation should be given more
Okay.
importance. Sir rightly pointed out in terms of like how do we recycle water, rejuvenate water, and when it comes to Cauvery water sharing also, there should be the water sharing formula should be determined on the basis of like how much investment both the states are going to give for water conservation strategy, rather than like water what is that supply. Okay, how much TMC, what is the TMC has to be shared? It has to be based on like how much efforts these governments are taking, because one of the reports says Bangalore has highest water loss, second highest water loss in the country. 46% of like Bangalore's drinking water is wasted in pipeline. There are problems. Okay, so in that particular context, we can think of these long-term solutions. Investment in water conservation strategy would be the best thing.
All right, Sandeep Anirudha, if I can ask you,
Sneha?
as citizens and as people who are working with other citizens as well, how are you looking at getting your daily water requirements? I mean, I'm understanding from what you are saying, you're not getting it. Your water your water taps have turned dry today. While there's a lot that needs to be fixed, what are you looking at?
See, we've been putting a lot of pressure on our civic officials, especially BWSSB. We've been chasing the KGW to stop the theft of groundwater. But the government institutions are not coping, and they just don't have capacity. And the elephant in the room here is governance. There is serious malgovernance. There is a serious lack of capacity. Vishwanath was pointing out that we don't have hydrogeologists. But the truth be said, the city doesn't have urban planners. We don't have a planning authority. And we are not planning for the limits of the city. See, there are two things that are very important. One, the development model we are following is extremely flawed. We don't recognize the limits of a city. Second thing, we don't respect ecology and environment. If these, see, our real home is the environment. We can't grow beyond the limits of the environment. Then this is what will happen. And we just don't have a planned approach. Why is Bengaluru going through a monster growth when all the other second, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities are not being developed? Why don't we spread development evenly so that people don't have to migrate to Bengaluru? Why don't this development happen throughout the country so that people don't have to rush to the cities and migrate and put all this tremendous stress on the city, and the city becomes a monster and it consumes resources of
That's
all
a very
the
difficult question to answer because, quite frankly, that's a totally different topic of discussion. I'm not going to get into that. But
Today,
Joseph
how come
Hoover,
there is a lack
you've
of
seen
doing
what the
all
government is trying to do.
Yeah.
No,
No,
fair enough.
unfortunately,
That's one of the
Sneha-
aspects. But I can't digress into that because
No, but Sneha, because we don't talk about
it's a-
all that before, we end up with this consequence. And now is when they will actually listen to us. Now is when we need to stress, we need planned development, we need to
I don't
respect
even
ecology
think
and environment. So we
they are
don't
in a
land up
position
with
to listen to that because they have an urgent, imminent crisis before them. But I'm just left with 2-3 minutes. Let me just try and get two people again into this. Joseph Hoover, you've heard what the government has been doing. From taking over the tankers, the private tankers, or trying to take over, warning them that they will take over, to giving the crisis funding. Do you see this steps that can solve these issues? I mean, a simple question that came to my mind: if you had such a deficit monsoon, if you know your borewells are drying, if you know your borewells are not going to sustain and are going to dry up, set up war rooms 6 months back. Why now, when you're almost facing at the brunt of a crisis? What's the point of it now? I mean, I'm not saying nothing will happen, but these are measures that could have been foreseen very easily.
Yeah, these are all superficial efforts. It's not going to resolve our issues. But just going back a little, a few months ago, I mean, and I would say 1.5 years ago, the Environment Management Research Policy Institute, they had given a white paper to the government when Mr. Bommai was the chief minister, saying that X number of districts will go dry. There'll be no water, including Bangalore urban and rural. It was specified. But despite that, what happened was they started destroying the lakes. There was a lake nearby where I live called Oscarelli. They destroyed it by making a road in the middle of the road. There's no water there. It's gone dry. And people today are begging the Bangalore Water Supply Board to say that at least let the drainage, sewage water come in there. So we could, at least get some percolation of water there and fill up, get some water from our borewells. So this is what they've done. I would say where I live, within a radius of about 5 kilometers, seven lakes have been destroyed. 4 of them are bone dry. And these are sources of water which would have recharged our groundwater level. Not that it would have helped much in this situation, but we have destroyed despite knowing what it was. So where do we go from here? So this is the thing that we have all got into.
Right.
We have made it ourselves.
I'm just being told to wrap. The last question, let me just go over to Mr. Vishwanath. Do you want to add to anything? I just have a minute for you to sum this up if you want to say the last word on this show. India is watching. Bengaluru is at the heart of India when it comes to so many aspects, including the IT city, the growth, the development, and so many narratives. This crisis is not isolated. Remember, India has been seeing some unprecedented flooding, unprecedented drought, and Bengaluru is just one chapter in India's climate crisis that's unfolding. Mr. Vishwanath, last words.
Well, protect all the lakes, revive all the lakes that Joseph is mentioning, make sure that they're all protected, desilted, fill them with tertiary treated wastewater, fill the Shirvankere and Nallurhaddi lake next to Sandeep Anirudhan's house, fill it with tertiary treated wastewater so that his borewell comes alive. And before Sandeep moves on to the small village and town that he wants everybody else to move to, which is what I would like to know from him when he's doing the moving to that small town and village, let's make sure that he has water in his borewell.
In fact, I'd like to point out that the Karnataka state water policy, which was adopted by the government in 2022, should be implemented. They've been sitting on it. It talks about integrated everything that
we'll have this debate separately.
We're going to have more trouble coming.
All right. Thank you very much, all four of you. You all four have been very critical to bring in some very important perspectives. We just hope Bengaluru will be able to wade through this. Of course, the citizens are resilient. Bengaluru is resilient. But the problem is in a long-term solution and not just any short-sightedness. Thank you very much, all four of you, for joining us. It's time for a short break. On the other side, news and updates.